In the heart of New York City, where dreams are as tall as skyscrapers and money often talks louder than words, there lived a man named Ryan. He wasn't your typical guy chasing wealth or fame. Instead, he spent his days sketching designs, trying to make ends meet with his small graphic design business. Life wasn't easy for him. He had big dreams but an even smaller bank account. Yet, despite all the struggles, Ryan had something many people envied: a kind heart and a knack for finding beauty in unexpected places. One evening, fate decided to step into Ryan's life in the form of a charity gala. It was one of those fancy events hosted by a billionaire family, full of glittering chandeliers, expensive suits, and women dripping in jewels. Ryan didn't exactly fit in. He felt out of place among the polished crowd. But he'd been invited because someone thought his artistic skills might impress the host, a wealthy businessman everyone called the Tycoon. As Ryan wandered through the crowded room, sipping on a glass of champagne he couldn't afford, his eyes landed on her. She stood near the edge of the room, away from the spotlight, dressed simply in a navy blue dress that didn't scream luxury like the others. Her face wasn't what most would call conventionally beautiful. Her features were sharp, almost severe, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence that seemed to repel attention rather than attract it. People whispered behind their hands when they glanced at her, calling her the ugly daughter of the billionaire. But Ryan saw something different. There was a calmness about her, a depth in her eyes that hinted at untold stories. He noticed how she listened intently when someone spoke to her, nodding thoughtfully instead of pretending to care like so many others in the room. Curiosity got the better of him, and before he knew it, Ryan found himself walking toward her. "Hi," he said, offering a warm smile. "I'm Ryan. I don't think we've met." She looked up, surprised but not unkind. After a moment, she replied, "No, we haven't. I'm Victoria." Her voice was soft yet firm, carrying a hint of amusement, as if she already knew the whispers circulating around her. They started talking, and to Ryan's delight, Victoria turned out to be witty, intelligent, and refreshingly honest. Unlike the other guests who bragged about their latest investments or vacation homes, Victoria spoke passionately about books she loved and causes she cared about. They discovered a shared love for art and storytelling, and soon hours passed without either of them noticing. Over the next few months, Ryan and Victoria kept crossing paths at another event, then coffee shops, and eventually long phone calls late into the night. Ryan found himself looking forward to these moments more than anything else in his life. Victoria wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. She wasn't trying to impress him or win him over with charm. She was just real. And that was rare in a world filled with pretense. Then came the twist neither of them expected. One day, Victoria's father approached Ryan with an offer he couldn't ignore. The Tycoon wanted to invest in Ryan's struggling design studio, but only if Ryan agreed to marry one of his daughters. It was a classic deal straight out of a movie script, the kind Ryan would have laughed at if it weren't happening to him. The catch? The choice was his. He could pick any of the three daughters, the glamorous ones who graced magazine covers, or Victoria, the one everyone dismissed. For a moment, Ryan hesitated. This wasn't how he imagined his life playing out. But deep down, he knew the truth. He didn't want the glamorous sisters. He wanted Victoria. When Ryan told Victoria about the proposal, she raised an eyebrow. "You do realize this isn't some fairy tale, right?" she said dryly. "People will talk. They'll say you're marrying me for my family's money." Ryan shook his head firmly. "That's not why I'm doing this," he said. "I'm doing it because I care about you. Because I see you, Victoria, not the labels people put on you." To his surprise, Victoria agreed, but with one condition: a strict prenuptial agreement stating that Ryan wouldn't inherit a single penny if their marriage ended. Ryan was stunned. Most people would jump at the chance to secure billions. But Victoria insisted on protecting both of them from greed and misunderstanding. It was clear she valued honesty above everything else. The wedding was a spectacle, as lavish as one would expect from a billionaire's family. Cameras flashed, reporters buzzed, and guests gossiped endlessly. Some admired Ryan's bold move, while others sneered, convinced he was nothing more than a gold digger. But what no one realized, not even Ryan himself, was that marrying Victoria was about to change his life in ways he could never have imagined. Little did Ryan know, the real story was just beginning. Behind Victoria's quiet exterior lay secrets that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, wealth, and happiness. Life after the wedding wasn't what Ryan had expected, at least not in the way he'd imagined. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. They moved into a luxurious penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The place was stunning, filled with expensive furniture and artwork that screamed wealth. But as the days turned into weeks, Ryan began to notice something strange. Victoria wasn't exactly living the high life people assumed she would. For starters, she spent most of her time either locked away in her study or out running errands that she refused to talk about. When Ryan asked where she went or what she did, she'd simply shrug and say, "Just taking care of some things." At first, he thought it was harmless. Everyone has their quirks, right? But as time went on, her evasiveness started to bother him. She was polite and kind, but there was a distance between them. Like she was holding back a part of herself. Ryan tried to bridge the gap. He'd cook dinner for her, hoping they could sit down together and have a proper conversation. Sometimes she'd join him, but even then, she seemed distracted. Her phone would buzz constantly, and she'd excuse herself to take calls in another room. Other times, she'd come home late at night, looking tired and preoccupied. It felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders, but whenever Ryan offered to help, she'd smile faintly and say, "It's nothing you need to worry about." One evening, after weeks of feeling like he was walking on eggshells, Ryan decided to confront her. They were sitting on the couch, watching the city lights flicker outside their window. Taking a deep breath, he turned to her and said, "Victoria, I feel like there's something you're not telling me. Is everything okay?" She hesitated, her fingers tracing the edge of the blanket draped over her lap. For a moment, Ryan thought, she might open up. But then she shook her head and forced a smile. "I'm fine," she said softly. "Really, just busy." Busy with what? That question haunted Ryan. He wanted to believe her, but the nagging feeling in his gut wouldn't go away. Something didn't add up. The breaking point came one rainy afternoon when Ryan was searching for a book in Victoria's study. He wasn't snooping well, maybe a little, but he figured if they were going to make this marriage work, he needed to understand her better. As he rummaged through the shelves, his hand brushed against something unusual hidden behind a row of books. Curious, he pulled it out and realized it was a false panel covering a secret compartment in the desk. Inside, he found stacks of documents neatly organized in folders. At first glance, they looked like financial records, but as Ryan flipped through them, his eyes widened in disbelief. These weren't ordinary bank statements. They were detailed reports of charitable donations made under Victoria's name. Millions of dollars poured into causes ranging from building schools in underserved communities to funding medical research for rare diseases. Each donation was anonymous, leaving no trace of her involvement. Ryan sat there stunned. How had he missed this side of Victoria? Sure, she'd always struck him as compassionate, but this level of generosity was on a completely different scale. And yet, here she was, quietly changing lives without seeking recognition or praise. Why would someone with so much power and influence choose to stay in the shadows? That night, Ryan couldn't sleep. His mind raced with questions. Was this why she kept such a low profile? Did she prefer staying out of the limelight because she didn't want people judging her motives? Or was there something else driving her secrecy? When Victoria walked into the bedroom later that evening, Ryan was still awake, staring at the ceiling. Hearing her footsteps, he turned to face her. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. Victoria froze, her expression unreadable. Slowly, she nodded and sat down on the edge of the bed. "Okay," she said cautiously. "What's wrong?" Ryan took a deep breath. "I found the files in your desk," he admitted. "All those donations. You've been doing this for years, haven't you?" For a long moment, Victoria didn't respond. Then, with a sigh, she leaned back against the headboard and closed her eyes. "Yes," she finally said, "I have." "Why didn't you tell me?" Ryan asked, his tone tinged with hurt. "This is huge, Victoria. You're helping so many people, but you act like it's nothing." "It is nothing," she replied sharply, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "At least, it shouldn't be a big deal. Helping others isn't supposed to be about getting attention or patting yourself on the back. I do it because it's the right thing to do, not because I want applause." Ryan stared at her, realizing how deeply ingrained this belief was in her. Still, it didn't answer all his questions. But why keep it a secret? He pressed gently. "You could inspire so many people if you let them know what you're doing." Victoria's jaw tightened, and for the first time, Ryan saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "Because I don't trust people to see me for who I am," she admitted quietly. "They only care about my last name or how much money I have. If they knew about the donations, they'd twist it into something it's not, another reason to gossip or criticize. I don't want that." Her words hit Ryan like a punch to the gut. He thought about all the whispers he'd heard at their wedding, the judgmental looks and snide comments. People had written her off before even giving her a chance, just like they judged him for marrying her. No wonder she kept her walls up. "I get it," Ryan said softly, reaching for her hand. "You've been protecting yourself. But you don't have to shut me out too, Victoria. I'm not here to judge you. I'm here to support you." Tears welled up in her eyes, and for once, she didn't try to hide them. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "It's hard for me to let people in. I've spent my whole life being told I'm not good enough, that I'll never measure up to, well, to everyone else in my family. I guess I stopped trying to prove them wrong." Ryan squeezed her hand tightly. "You don't have to prove anything to me," he said firmly. "You're more than enough, Victoria. Always have been." As they sat there in silence, the rain tapping gently against the windows, Ryan realized this was just the beginning. There was so much more to learn about Victoria, her struggles, her fears, her dreams. But for the first time since their wedding, he felt hopeful. Maybe their marriage wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that was worth fighting for. As days passed, Ryan and Victoria began to find a new rhythm in their relationship. The discovery of her secret philanthropy had opened a door that neither of them had realized was closed. For the first time, Victoria started sharing pieces of herself, her thoughts, her fears, and even her past that she'd kept hidden for so long. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when she hesitated, her guard slipping back into place. But Ryan was patient, giving her space while gently encouraging her to trust him. One evening, as they sat together on the balcony of their penthouse, sipping tea under the soft glow of string lights, Ryan decided to ask the question that had been lingering in his mind. "Victoria," he began carefully, "you've told me about your work and how you help people. But I still don't understand why you're so distant from your family. What happened between you guys?" Victoria stiffened slightly, clutching her mug tighter. She stared at the city skyline for a long moment before letting out a sigh. "It's complicated," she said finally. "My family isn't like yours, or maybe like anyone else's, really. Everything revolves around money, power, and appearances. Ryan nodded slowly, urging her to continue. When I was younger, she went on, her voice quieter now, I used to try so hard to fit in. My sisters were always the stars of the show, the pretty ones, the popular ones. They knew exactly how to charm people, how to play the game. Me, I never did. I hated all the fake smiles and shallow conversations. So instead, I focused on school, books, and causes I cared about. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. She paused, her gaze dropping to her hands. Then, a few years ago, something changed. My father, he needed money. One of his businesses was failing, and he came to me asking for help. He promised me it would be temporary, just until things got better. But then, her voice cracked slightly, and she took a shaky breath. He made me sign over control of my inheritance to fund his projects. He said it was for the family, that we all had to make sacrifices, and I trusted him. Ryan's heart sank as he listened. He could see the pain etched on her face, the betrayal she'd buried deep inside. It wasn't until later that I realized what he'd done. Victoria continued bitterly. He didn't care about the family. He only cared about himself. Once he had my money, he stopped pretending to care about me. My sisters barely noticed. I wasn't important enough to them anyway. That's when I decided to cut ties. I couldn't keep living like that, being used and discarded whenever it suited them. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Ryan reached out and placed a hand on hers, squeezing gently. I'm so sorry you went through that, he said sincerely. No one deserves to be treated like that, not by their own family. Victoria managed a small, sad smile. Thanks, she murmured. But I've moved on, or at least I thought I had. Sometimes, though, I wonder if I'll ever truly escape. Their shadow. Ryan shook his head firmly. You already have, he said. Look at everything you've accomplished. You've built this incredible life for yourself, helping others without expecting anything in return. That's not something they can take away from you. For a brief moment, Victoria's eyes softened, and Ryan saw a flicker of hope in them. But then her expression hardened again, as if she was steeling herself against vulnerability. Maybe, she said quietly, but it doesn't change the fact that my name is still tied to theirs. As long as I'm part of this family, people will always assume the worst about me. Ryan frowned, considering her words. What if you could change that? He asked suddenly. What if you took back control not just of your life, but of your family's legacy too? Victoria raised an eyebrow, skeptical. And how exactly do you propose I do that? Ryan leaned forward, his tone earnest. You're stronger than they are, Victoria. Smarter too. If anyone can turn things around, it's you. Imagine using your position to make a real difference, not just behind the scenes, but out in the open. Show the world who you really are. At first, Victoria laughed a dry, humorless sound. You make it sound so simple, she said. Do you have any idea how impossible that is? My father won't let go of his empire without a fight. And my sisters? They'll side with him every step of the way. Maybe, Ryan admitted, but you don't have to face it alone. Let me help you. Together, we can figure this out. Victoria studied him for a long moment, searching his face for signs of doubt or hesitation. But all she saw was determination and love. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay, she said softly. Let's try. Over the next few weeks, Ryan and Jen worked tirelessly. Victoria dug up old records, emails, and financial documents that proved her father's unethical practices. Ryan, with his creative skills, helped organize the information into a clear, compelling narrative that exposed the truth. It wasn't easy. There were late nights, heated arguments, and moments of doubt, but they pushed forward, driven by a shared goal. Throughout it all, Ryan marveled at Victoria's resilience. Despite the emotional toll of revisiting painful memories, she remained steadfast, refusing to back down. And as they pieced together the evidence, Ryan couldn't help but feel proud of her. This wasn't just about revenge or justice, it was about reclaiming her identity and proving that she was more than the sum of her family's mistakes. Finally, the day arrived when Victoria was ready to confront her father. Armed with irrefutable proof of his misdeeds, she walked into a board meeting where he presided over a group of investors and executives. The room fell silent as she placed a folder on the table in front of him. "I think you'll want to see this," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Her father's face turned pale as he flipped through the documents. For once, he was speechless. The accusations were undeniable, and the fallout was immediate. Within hours, news outlets picked up the story, and the billionaire's reputation crumbled. Faced with mounting pressure, he stepped down as CEO. Leaving the company in turmoil. In the aftermath, Victoria stepped into the leadership role reluctantly but determinedly. With Ryan by her side, she transformed the business into a force for good, prioritizing ethical practices and community-focused initiatives. Under her guidance, the family name became synonymous with integrity rather than greed. Through it all, Ryan watched as Victoria blossomed into the person she was always meant to be. She was no longer the quiet, reserved woman he'd met at the gala. She was confident, fearless, and unapologetically herself. And as they stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Ryan knew one thing for certain. Their journey was far from over, but whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The weeks following the boardroom showdown were a whirlwind of activity for Victoria and Ryan. The fallout from exposing her father's unethical practices dominated headlines, turning their once private lives into public spectacle. Reporters camped outside their building, paparazzi snapped photos at every opportunity, and social media buzzed with opinions, some supportive, others harshly critical. But amidst the chaos, Victoria remained focused. She knew this was her chance to rewrite not just her own story, but also the legacy of her family's empire. Taking over as CEO wasn't something Victoria had ever planned for, but she approached it with the same determination that had driven her secret philanthropy. With Ryan by her side, she began implementing sweeping changes within the company. Gone were the days of prioritizing profits above all else. Now, the business would operate on principles of fairness, sustainability, and community impact. It wasn't an easy transition. There were skeptics among the board, members and employees who doubted her ability to lead, but Victoria refused to back down. Ryan played a crucial role in helping her navigate the challenges. He used his design skills to create campaigns promoting transparency and accountability, crafting visuals that resonated with both clients and the public. Together they launched initiatives aimed at supporting local businesses, reducing environmental harm, and providing opportunities for underprivileged communities. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. People started seeing the company and Victoria in a new light. Despite the progress, there were moments when the pressure felt overwhelming. Late one night, after another grueling day of meetings and strategy sessions, Victoria collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she admitted, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "It feels like no matter what I do, someone's always waiting to tear me down." Ryan sat beside her, placing a comforting arm around her shoulders. "You're doing amazing," he said firmly. "Look at everything you've already accomplished. You've taken a toxic business and turned it into something people can believe in again. That's not small, it's huge. But is it enough?" Victoria asked, looking up at him. "What if I fail? What if they find a way to undo everything we've worked for?" Ryan shook his head. You won't fail because you're not doing this alone. We're in this together, remember? And besides, failure isn't the end, it's just part of the process. Every step forward counts, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. His words seemed to lift some of the weight off her shoulders, and she gave him a grateful smile. Thank you, she whispered. I don't know what I'd do without you. As the months passed, the transformation of the company became undeniable. Investors who had initially balked at Victoria's leadership began praising her vision. Employees rallied behind her mission, inspired by her commitment to making meaningful change. Even former critics softened their stance, acknowledging the positive impact she was having on the industry. For the first time in years, Victoria felt a sense of pride, not just in herself, but in the work she was doing. But while the external battles were being won, Victoria still wrestled with internal struggles. Her relationship with her family remained strained, especially with her father, who blamed her for his downfall. Though she had cut ties with him, she couldn't escape the lingering guilt of knowing she'd exposed someone she once loved. Her sisters, too, kept their distance, viewing her actions as a betrayal rather than a necessary correction. One afternoon, as Victoria sorted through old photo albums in her study, she came across a picture of her childhood, a rare moment when the entire family had seemed happy. Tears welled up in her eyes as memories flooded back. Birthdays, vacations, laughter shared around the dinner table. Those moments felt like a lifetime ago. Buried beneath layers of resentment and mistrust, Ryan found her sitting on the floor surrounded by photographs, her face streaked with tears. Without saying a word, he knelt beside her and pulled her into a hug. They stayed like that for a long time, letting the silence speak for itself. Eventually, Victoria broke the quiet. Do you think I'm a bad person for what I did? She asked softly. No, Ryan replied without hesitation. You did what you had to do to protect yourself and stand up for what's right. That doesn't make you bad, it makes you brave. She nodded slowly, wiping her tears. I just wish things could have been different, she murmured. I wish they could see me for who I really am. They might never understand, Ryan said gently. But that doesn't mean you stop being true to yourself. You've already proven how strong you are. Keep showing them and the world who you are. Eventually, they'll have no choice but to listen. As winter approached, Victoria decided to host a charity gala event to celebrate the company's renewed focus on giving back. It was her idea, born out of a desire to shine a spotlight on the causes closest to her heart. Ryan helped plan every detail, ensuring the evening would be unforgettable. The night of the gala arrived, and the venue sparkled with lights and music. Guests mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, sipping champagne and admiring displays showcasing the organization's achievements. At the center of it all stood Victoria, radiant in a simple yet elegant gown, greeting attendees with warmth and grace. Watching her from across the room, Ryan felt a surge of pride. She looked nothing like the reserved woman he'd met at there. Wedding Miss Victoria commanded attention not because of her wealth or title, but because of the strength and authenticity she exuded. During her speech, Victoria took a moment to thank everyone who had supported her journey. Change isn't easy, she said, her voice steady and clear. It requires courage, resilience, and sometimes sacrifices. But I've learned that the hardest battles often lead to the greatest victories. Tonight, we honor those victories, not just mine, but yours, because each of you has contributed to creating a better future. The crowd erupted into applause, many rising to their feet. As Victoria stepped away from the podium, she caught Ryan's eye and smiled, a genuine, heartfelt expression that spoke volumes. In that moment, she realized how far she'd come, not just professionally, but personally. She had faced her fears, confronted her past, and emerged stronger than ever. Later that night, as they danced under the stars on the rooftop terrace, Ryan leaned in close and whispered, "You were incredible tonight." Victoria laughed softly, resting her head against his shoulder. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You've believed in me from the start, even when I didn't believe in myself." "I'll always believe in you," Ryan replied, "because you're not just my wife, you're my partner, my rock, my everything." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by twinkling city lights, Victoria felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead wouldn't be without its challenges, but she knew they could face anything as long as they had each other. For the first time in her life, she truly felt free, not bound by expectations or labels, but empowered to live authentically and unapologetically, and in that freedom she found happiness. Years had passed since the night of the charity gala, and life for Victoria and Ryan had settled into a rhythm that was both fulfilling and unpredictable. The whirlwind of media attention and corporate upheaval had died down, replaced by a quieter but no less impactful existence. Their days were filled with purpose. Victoria continued to lead her company with integrity, while Ryan pursued his passion for graphic design, often collaborating with her on creative projects. Together, they built a life rooted in trust, love, and shared values. One crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves swirled in the breeze outside their penthouse windows, Ryan stood watching Victoria from across the room. She sat at her desk, engrossed in reviewing plans for a new initiative aimed at supporting underprivileged youth. Her brow furrowed in concentration, pen tapping lightly against the edge of her notebook. To Ryan, she looked every bit the woman. He'd fallen in love with the woman who saw beauty in brokenness and possibility in despair. He smiled to himself, marveling at how much she had grown. Gone was the guarded, distant figure he'd met years ago. In her place was someone confident, compassionate, and unafraid to take risks. Yet, beneath all her achievements and strength, she remained deeply human, flawed, vulnerable, and real. And that, more than anything, was what made him love her even more. As if sensing his gaze, Victoria glanced up and caught him staring. "What?" she asked with a playful smirk. "Do I have ink on my face or something?" Ryan chuckled, shaking his head. "No, just admiring the view." She rolled her eyes good-naturedly, but couldn't hide the faint blush creeping onto her cheeks. "You're ridiculous," she said, turning back to her work. But after a moment, she added softly, almost hesitantly, "You know, sometimes I wonder, why did you choose me? Out of everyone you could have been with, why me?" The question startled Ryan. He crossed the room and pulled up a chair beside her desk. "That's a strange thing to ask," he said gently. "Why are you thinking about that now?" Victoria shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "I don't know. Maybe because we've come so far together. Sometimes it feels like none of this should have worked out. You gave up so much to be with me, your freedom, your privacy, your normal life, and for what? A messy, complicated person like me." Ryan reached out and took her hand, his grip firm but tender. "Listen to me," he said, his voice steady. "I didn't give up anything. I gained everything when I chose you. Yeah, our journey hasn't been easy, but that's what makes it worth it. You've taught me things I never thought I'd learn about resilience, empathy, and what it means to truly care for someone. You're not just my wife. You're my best friend, my partner, my inspiration." Tears welled up in Victoria's eyes, though she blinked them away quickly. "You always know what to say," she murmured, squeezing his hand. "It's not about saying the right words," Ryan replied. "It's about meaning them, and I mean every single one." They sat there in silence for a while, holding hands and listening to the distant hum of the city below. For all the challenges they'd faced, moments like these reminded them of why they'd stayed together, not out of obligation or convenience, but because they genuinely wanted to share their lives with each other. A few weeks later, Victoria received an invitation to speak at a global summit on leadership and innovation. It was a prestigious event attended by some of the most influential figures in business and philanthropy. At first, she hesitated, unsure if she was ready to step back into the spotlight. But Ryan encouraged her, reminding her of how far she'd come and how many people could benefit from hearing her story. Standing on stage on the day of the summit, Victoria felt a mix of nerves and excitement. The auditorium was packed, the audience hanging on her every word as she recounted her journey from growing up, overshadowed by her family's expectations, to reclaiming her identity and transforming her company into a force for good. She spoke candidly about her struggles with self-doubt, the pain of betrayal, and the importance of staying true to oneself. "When I look back on my life," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion swelling inside her, "I realize that the hardest battles often lead to the greatest victories. But those victories aren't just mine. They belong to everyone who stands beside me, cheering me on, picking me up when I fall. Love, support, and trust, they're the foundation of everything I've achieved." As she concluded her speech, the crowd erupted into applause, rising to their feet in admiration. Among them was Ryan, clapping enthusiastically with tears glistening in his eyes. When Victoria stepped off stage, he greeted her with a bear hug, lifting her off the ground. "You did it," he whispered proudly. "You inspired thousands of people today." Victoria laughed, hugging him back tightly. "We did it," she corrected. "None of this would have been possible without you." That night, as they strolled through the city streets hand in hand, Victoria paused under a street lamp and turned to Ryan. "Do you ever think about the future?" she asked suddenly. "All the time," he replied, smiling. "Why? What's on your mind?" "I guess I wonder where we go from here," she said thoughtfully. "We've accomplished so much already. What's left for us to do?" Ryan tilted his head, considering her question. "Well, for starters, we could keep doing exactly what we're doing, helping others, building a better world. Or maybe we'll find something entirely new to tackle together. Either way, I'm not worried about running out of adventures." Victoria grinned, feeling a sense of peace wash over her. "Adventures sound good to me," she said, "as long as you're part of them." Ryan leaned in and kissed her forehead. "Always." Under the glow of the street lamp, surrounded by the sounds of the bustling city, they stood there for a moment, content in the knowledge that their story was still unfolding. Life wasn't perfect, it never would be, but perfection wasn't the goal. What mattered was the connection they shared, the impact they made, and the love that bound them together. And as they walked home beneath a canopy of stars, Victoria realized something profound. Happiness wasn't about finding someone who completed you. It was about finding someone who accepted you fully, flaws and all, and loving them just as fiercely in return.